If you do not experience FOMO, consider yourself heavily blessed, because lately it has been driving us to do some crazy things. One of the most surprising trends in the United States is people coveting grocery bags simply because they have a cute color. I mean, it's one thing to want something that's cute, right? Like, I totally get that. I have so many adorable knickknacks, but no. A couple weeks ago, Trader Joe's, which is a very popular grocery destination here in the United States, I shop there, it's fantastic, released its pastel edition of their mini tote bags, which, mind you, go for $3.99. $3.99, okay? Here I was driving around town and pulling up to go get groceries, and huge line, round the block. You know, who am I to judge how you spend your free time? But one thing I cannot stand by is that these pastel grocery bags, which are just little canvas totes, okay, not the most amazing tote ever, are reselling for hundreds of dollars. I think some of the initial hype has died down, but even reselling these for $20, $40, $50, $70, $90, which you can find all over eBay, seems absolutely absurd and egregious. I do wonder, though, how many people are just going to be stuck with an overstock of Trader Joe's pastel bags, especially since there are plenty of videos and pictures of people filling up their carts with these bags with the intention to resell them at a higher price. And I think we can look at this of a lens of hustle culture just going so far to where even everyday goods can get caught up in being resold or rebranded as a luxury item. Broadly, we are re-entering, or have already entered, a bit of a YOLO economy. YOLO, of course, is an aphorism. I didn't really know what that word was, but it's so nice to say, and now Wikipedia has taught me something. But YOLO, of course, is the acronym that refers to You Only Live Once, which was popularized by Drake in his song, The Motto. I am not ashamed to say that I believe during this period, I myself had a YOLO hat. It was everywhere. It was on Tumblr. I associate YOLO with high contrast. I associate YOLO with infinity signs. I associate YOLO with that period where people would just hold up random products to the screen like this and take pictures of them and post it. I think a YOLO economy is very interesting because we are in a period of extreme economic uncertainty, yet being told that the economy is still prosperous, and at the same time people are struggling to afford basic necessities. But there's still this desire to have fun and live it up and show off how carefree or well you are, whether that's a form of escapism or the anxieties around the uncertainty of the economy just feeding into comfort or doom shopping. Interestingly enough, 2012 and the surrounding years had a similar aura of undefined but universally felt economic insecurity. And that's not to say that it's anywhere the same. I think today's economic conditions, especially in the United States, are unprecedented for a lot of obvious reasons. But before we batten down the hatches, I think a lot of us like to delude ourselves that that won't be necessary. 1 in 5 adults indicate that they are doom spending or making impulsive purchases driven by fear and anxiety about the future, according to a recent report by creditcards.com. And some of these purchases make sense, especially with the tariffs that are going to undoubtedly affect the global economy in some way. I'm not surprised that 28% of Americans have already made a large purchase, such as a home appliance or home improvement supplies. Another 22% have started stockpiling certain items, including non-perishable food, toilet paper, and over-the-counter medications, according to creditcards.com. These habits are also pushing 34% of credit borrowers to take on more debt this year. I think an influx in short-term spending makes a lot of sense out of anxiety, but I also think it's important to acknowledge that people, especially younger generations, are just spending more out of kind of a defeatist acknowledgement that maybe the things that we dreamed of are going to be out of reach for whatever reason. And so we do things out of concession. Something I found so interesting is that 60% of the Coachella general admission tickets this year were financed through a buy now, pay later program. I mean, it's another case of you really cannot get a sense of what someone's life is like based on the things they do or what they portray that they do, because they can most definitely be somewhere and objectively not be able to afford it themselves. On giving up the dream, a Gen Z creator said, when houses are $1 million plus and an older couple will likely outbid us anyway, we're going to relinquish any lingering delusions about home ownership. Starting a family is so out of reach that we're using that payment or kid money or whatever it is we can afford that'll bring us some kind of adulthood that we were promised. There's definitely a balance between enjoying your life now and having a level of delayed gratification to set up your future self. But it's really hard to even think about that balance when A, a lot of people can't find a job, or B, people who do find a job find that their careers are in much more precarious situations, or just don't pay as much as they used to unless you're in a very specific set of industries. YOLO can also be thought of in a much more morbid sense. Without trust or funding public services and institutions like healthcare, education, so on and so forth, it can literally feel like we're a couple steps away from our own demise, especially factoring in that most Americans just do not have sufficient savings. If you live in the United States, you are probably very familiar with the practice of triaging yourself. Someone who is completely unqualified to triage a health problem before even seeing a doctor. Everybody knows we have an insurance problem, we have a healthcare problem, medical debt follows you after death. After death, when you're gone, whoever inherits whatever wealth you have will have to pay for that debt. And that's not even considering like housing or basic civil rights that are under threat in today's America. So adjusting to an end of the world mentality can feel like your only chance of having some semblance of control. We cannot expect anything other than rampant and vigorous destabilization. So YOLO. If you're lucky enough to get a job, you might be more replaceable than ever. Unions are down and more difficult to create as power becomes rapidly centralized into just a handful of buckets. I've talked a lot about ghost jobs, or just how impersonal the hiring and firing process has become. I thought it was very interesting that, companies like Shopify have come out and said, we're not hiring new people unless our team can figure out how to do more things with AI. Streaming platforms like Spotify have progressively reduced the rates that pay out to musicians, so much so that when I put up a song now, until I reach 1,000 streams, which I haven't on all tracks, I make zero from when people listen back. And that's not even getting into some of the mechanisms behind what's called perfect content fit and these ghost composers, artists who are paid out in bulk for a lump sum of music instead of earning from their work. There's this book that talks a lot about that. I need to make a separate video, but highly recommend if you're interested in that sort of thing. Even if we're not talking about financial incentive here, I think it's safe to say that a lot of people do not have a strong sense of neededness in today's world. We are made to extend effort. We are made to feel counted on by other people. And I don't think that automation has to come with depersonalization and disconnection, but unfortunately, I feel like that's what's happening in a lot of areas. I think it's really important to remember that in times of extreme economic uncertainty or downturns or recessions or the recession that's not called a recession, there are people who benefit from that. Okay? And typically, these are people who already have wealth. When everyday people lose their assets, those with abundant wealth are often ready to gain them. And this is a self-fulfilling prophecy because the more you lose, the harder it is to get out of a hole of debt or low income. And as people assume more and more wealth unchecked, the gully of separation between your day-to-day lives just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. For a long time, I thought that the finish line of the American dream is just owning a home. And so many people won't get to that. I hope I'll get to that. But so many people won't get to that. But even if you get there, nothing is guaranteed. There are so many people who are house poor because they cannot afford not just the mortgages that they took out, but when the value of your home and area and property taxes outpaces your income, you're left with very few options. What can we do about this? I think we can be really vocal about what we're dealing with and be honest with the people in our lives about how we're doing. I think there needs to be more discussion and transparency around money and what it takes to do certain activities and experiences and the expectations around that. I also think we need to be very careful about our purchases, speaking to myself included, which sounds like a slap in the face when it's such a tight environment. And that's not to say that wage stagnation doesn't play a considerable role in all of this, but more in the sense of, am I buying this out of fear? Is there another way I can experience this? Can I wait a month to get this, to really make sure that I actually want it and have the paycheck come in versus putting it on a card? What can I do to learn finance? Because finance and personal finances are a skill. Just taking a second. I find a lot of times if I'm really, really wanting something, if I write it down and let it cool a little, half of the things that I want, I will forget about. I think it's really important to, if you can, support the communities and creators that mean a lot to you, because increasingly there's little to no financial incentive for people to create, which doesn't mean that there aren't other incentives and doesn't mean that people will not create beautiful, wonderful things. but it will become increasingly harder for artists and contributors of culture to focus on just that. And on that note, I think it's high time we decouple how we make money from our identities. I think if you have a job that aligns in that way, that's fantastic, but you shouldn't feel bad if you don't. You only live once, but your future self deserves a comfortable, sustainable lifestyle where you can focus on things that really matter. Hang in there. If it's hard for you right now, you're not alone. And remember that so much of what we see in this economy is held up by toothpicks. I don't know if that's comforting, actually, but yeah, I don't know. Be careful. Be careful. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Kate. This was my series called Cattle Considerations, where I talk about art, culture, and the internet, and honestly, really anything. Really, I'm also an artist. If you're interested in that, you can find all my links in the description. And yeah, I will be back later. Bye.